Hello everyone. We're actually going to start a little early tonight, being that I have to run some errands later this evening. Tonight we are working on a vintage Valentine's Day painting, a Don't Fiddle With My Heart. I printed off my reference image, and I don't know if I ever covered it, but the way that I transfer them is that I just put the image behind and then hold it up to light and then use watercolor pencil to trace it on. If you're wanting to use something larger than the 8.5 and 11, but I usually upload them to as, you can scale them and print them larger across multiple pages and put them on your canvas that way. If you're trying to scale to a size and are not comfortable kind of recreating that image in a larger size by hand drawing. So as usual, I'm going to start with my background first, and being that my reference image didn't have much in the way of an actual background, they left this area white and this part is sort of a blue. I am going to make this sort of a dark turquoise and this kind of a light blue, because those are the colors that I really like. And I think they look kind of good with a contrast against the red. Kind of a cool to balance the warm. Some color wheel tech for you today. And I'm going to start off with my 1/2-inch angle brush to get my line in and kind of go around the area that I'm wanting to make my table, because that's what this is. It's kind of sitting on a table. And don't forget your sides as you're going. And I'll worry about hitting the bottom once I'm finished with the rest of this area. Happy Wednesday, by the way. Today is National Tater Tot Day. If you really like your potato vegetable, starch, however way you want to see it, I hope you enjoyed some today. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and flip it over just to get the bottom real quick so it has the most amount of dry time before I want to do the top part. Just so that it's, less likely to smudge. And we're not thinking too hard about the direction of this. We're just putting in a table. We're just giving the background. That's all. Nothing too stressful. And don't forget your sides. We're almost done kind of filling this in. And I'm just going to fix my brush strokes a little bit so that way they're all kind of going in the same direction. Okay, and I'm going to rinse off my brush. And I'm going to put some light blue down on my canvas to do this part. And you could do your background or even any part of this in any color that makes the most sense for you or your Valentine if you're giving this to somebody. This would make a super cute little Valentine's Day gift. I'm really kind of excited to do this as a painting series. It's going to be so adorable. I can't wait to see your projects. If you do post one, if you do make one like this, definitely tag me in it and I'll feature you in my stories. Definitely want to see all the fun art happening. Show me your growth. Post to my sounding board on Facebook as well. Always happy to see, fan art, recreations, or your interpretations of my paintings. Because you might see this totally different. You could totally do a goth version of this and do it all in like black and white, or, you don't have to stick with my color scheme here, which is why I did not post a color scheme. This is not like trying to copy, any kind of particular character where they'd be noted for a specific color set. This is more of a paint your own adventure. So you're going to want to paint whatever is most meaningful to you or your Valentine. Or if you just really like this aesthetic, you might want to choose to use less bright colors, things that would really kind of distress it so it would look as old as the concept. That is a personal choice. I am not choosing to do that. I'm just taking the idea. And you don't have to be super meticulous about this because you're going to go over this with another color, and as long as whatever color you're putting in will cover red really well. You don't have to be too particular. Unless you're doing a very dark background, you can kind of do this kind of willy-nilly a little bit. And we might go back in and add some fun detail or something into the background when it's dry. But for now, we're just putting our base layer of color in. This will not be a dot painting. This is going to just be a standard acrylic painting with a less strict style on texture. Which definitely makes this more beginner friendly in some ways and less so in others. Will require a little more discipline and in your shaping and your adding of shading and whatnot as you go, because you won't be, layering upon layering colors that would do that for you. So definitely keep that in mind as you're working. And it's not specifically called out really well, but there's a spot here that you should also do in your background, because that's sort of the background behind the fiddle and the heart there. And there's a little spot here too. And I switched over to a 1 round just because this area was a little smaller and the details were a little more difficult to get in through. All right, and that's our background for now. I just gotta touch up the sides and the top. So I'm gonna flip my canvas over. And get the sides and the top. All right, and once you've got your background in, we are going to start with the center and work our way out. So we're going to put our violin in next. And it calls out for sort of like a reddish brown color, like a very lustrous. So I'm actually going to start with like a red ochre. And I'm going to put a little bit of burnt sienna down as well. Or burnt umber. Burnt umber and red ochre are the colors I'm putting down. Now I'm going to take my smallest detail brush. And I'm going to start by doing this part here in that burnt umber. Because this is sort of one of the darkest spots. We don't want it so dark that we can't see the black strings when we put them in, but we do need it to be pretty dark. You might want to add a little bit of water to your brush if you're having trouble with little like dots forming and not getting a clean line. If you are having trouble resisting the urge to stick your hand down into any of your wet paint, I recommend that you dry your canvas. I probably will here very shortly, just because I am already resisting the urge. It helps if you really like press your elbow down into the table to keep you from resting your hand in your paint. Okay, so we've got that first part of our fiddle in, this darkest section. It's also matched by a dark section in the same kind of color down here. I don't know enough about musical instruments to know the anatomy of a fiddle, but if you do happen to know what these pieces are called, I would love the knowledge. Feel free to share that below or in chat or comment if you're watching this as a recorded YouTube video. All right, so we've got that part in. And the next darkest part is sort of like the shadow of the layer. So we're going to go ahead and put our red ochre in. And we're going to put that over here on the side. And you see it looks kind of like a reddish brown. And the reason why this part would be darker is because of the way that it is turned away from the light, because it is the side of the violin or the fiddle. Excuse me. And you'll want to kind of put a round bit here because we are going to do a section in the middle of this that is sort of a darker color as well. Okay. And we're going to be adding some detail back into this section, but for now we are just kind of putting our color in place. Right now we're taking that bit of that burnt umber and we're going to put that up here in the center. And while this paint is a little wet, I'm going to take just the barest little bit and I'm going to mix it in a little into the details here. Not a lot, just a little swivel here and there just to darken up the sides. All right, I'm going to continue working in and filling in my red ochre. And a little bit of that kind of shadow in there as well. Just because that part would have been hooked under and would also be a little bit darker. Right, we're going to take a little bit of that burnt umber and add a little of that in there. Again, just kind of adding a little bit of something to indicate that that's the dark side. And on this side, we're going to use the red ochre on the side, on this side, because now this is going to be the darkest part of this side. We're kind of creating the shadow for this side now, because we're implying the bulk of the light is hitting right here in the center. So that will be the lightest part. That is often the hardest part when you're learning how to paint, is identifying your light source and what direction the light is coming from. Okay, so we've got that kind of part in there. And you might stick a little bit of this kind of red there and a little bit of this here. But now we're going to go and add a little bit of white to our red ochre to make a slightly lighter version of this. All right, and we're going to just kind of fill that space in. We'll add a little bit of white and whatnot while the paint is still wet. I'm not worried about painting over the details because those are just more for my placement and for your placement. But unless you really feel like you would not remember how to draw the little eyes and the little squiggles back on, you know, feel free to paint over them. They're just there as a reference for you. And the same with these lines. We're just kind of slowly kind of filling in this space. And we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna add some highlighting and whatnot in here, but for now, we're just trying to get this base layer of color in. All right, now I'm gonna use the white and sort of create a lighter section here in the center. I'm just kind of blending it into the paint I've already added. And we're going to do this a couple of different times to add some extra dimension to this. Because right now it's sort of plain. All right, so we've added a little bit. I'm going to rinse my brush just so that way I'm not moving around the same color over and over again. And I'm going to pick up some more of the plain white, and I'm just going to keep going sort of here in this center area. And a little over there too. And while I've got it, I'm going to go ahead and take a little bit of this darker color, and I'm going to mix in a couple little details there. And we're going to tell a little story about like a little highlight over here on the side. And maybe a little up here as well. And a little on this side. We're just creating a little bit of texture. And so we've kind of got our base layer of our brown. So I'm going to go ahead and dry it so that way I can start putting in his face and adding in the details. And now I think we're going to go ahead and put a little bit, just the littlest bit of black on our palette. I'm actually, no, I can't use the cap doesn't have any paint in it. So I have to put the littlest bit that I can on my palette. Because I'm only using this pretty much for the eyes and the strings. All right, so the strings kind of come up from here and go across and all the way up to the top here. So to make myself feel a little braver about doing this, I am going to take some kind of a little ruler and a watercolor pencil. And I'm going to use this to help me make some lines, just to help me get the idea of where they belong. Oh, this is a little bit not dark enough. Grab a different one. There we go. This should be dark enough. And there are 4 lines. So we've kind of got the basis of the lines in, and that will really kind of help us. But first we kind of have to paint in his little smiley thing, because the white for his smile has to come in before we put in our black lines. So I'm just going to draw in that little white little thing like that. And sort of this little brown layer that goes above it and below it. And then we'll create our little eyes. And they kind of slant off this way. And this way. And I'm going to fill it all the way in white. I added a little more than I meant to on that eye, so I'm just going to correct that real quick. It got a little away from me. And that's okay. It happens. And while I'm right there, I'll go ahead and add the bottom part of the pupil. It kind of goes like this. If it mixes in with your white, that's a little fine. We'll touch it up and add another layer there after. But I am going to surround the eyes in the brown, or at least the white part in the brown. Okay. And we'll use the brown to add our little eyebrow S's. And they kind of go like that. And now we'll go ahead and add in our black lines. Now remember, they go over his mouth. I don't know why I ascribed it a gender. We have no idea what gender this fiddle is. You could make yours hot pink, and it could still be a he. You do you. I'm saying he's a he just because, I don't know, I like the idea of the fiddle, of the guy asking you not to fiddle with his heart. But it could totally go either way. This is a gender neutral Valentine. All right, so we've got those parts of the line, but now we got to do up here. And because it's easier for me to draw lines that way, I'm going to turn it upside down to make it easier for me. If it's easier for you to leave it up the other way, you know, you do what works best for you. The idea here is that you should barely be able to see these lines as they come up to the top of the dark wood. And they will be kind of close together, almost overlapping as you come up the neck of this. So we have kind of the basis of our fiddle in for now. There'll be more detail, but for now we'll move on. Next, we're going to do the next big obvious thing, the heart. And I'm going to start this off with cadmium red hue. And quinacridone scarlet. They're very similar in shade, but I want this one to be, these littler ones to be obviously slightly lighter or slightly darker since they're touching up against each other. So I'm going to take my 5/8 angle brush and I'm going to use the quinacridone scarlet on this front heart. And, you know, using an angle brush is definitely ideal here because then you can just follow the line of the shape of the brush. I cannot believe we are already into February and we are starting February's theme. I don't know where the time has been going, but it needs to stop. It needs to stop. It's going too fast. Right now I'm going to clean up my shape a little bit. I followed it exactly as it was drawn there, but I kind of feel like this needs to extend out a little more for a more rounded heart shape. I definitely feel a little better about that. Yeah, much better. All right, now I'm going to rinse off my brush. Now I'm going to switch over to my detail brush, or my one round. I'm going to switch over to my one round. And I'm going to use the cadmium deep red hue on these littler hearts that are behind the violin. And I'm going to flip it upside down because I don't trust myself not to stick my wrist down in this red paint. And you should be able to see like a visible difference between these two shades of red. If you have two different shades of red, that's fine. You're just kind of wanting one to be at least noticeably lighter or darker than the other, just for background's sake. It definitely makes it easier to look at. They did not do that in this image, which bothers me a little, which is why I'm making the correction in my version. And we're just kind of filling this in for now. Again, you could do any color accent that makes the most sense for you and your sweetie. You know, paint with your audience in mind. I will not, for all of these, be painting them as they're, you know, color coded on the original vintage. I occasionally like to go off and do my own thing. And I'm going to stick a little bit of this lighter, like in a couple of accent places on the darker one, just so that it looks like it makes sense with the one that's already there. Not anything too noticeable, just a little there. And I'm going to fill in this other little heart. I am working on an 8x10 canvas today. I decided that for this painting, it didn't make sense to do it on anything larger than this because it's a seasonal painting. And I'd be either looking to give it as a gift or hope to sell it for someone else to give it as a gift. And being mindful of, you know, seasonal paintings, people don't usually want super large ones because then they have to figure out how to store it if they don't want it up year round. You know, just being mindful of that kind of thought process. But if you've got an adorable little girl that you want to give something like this to, they might love this kind of aesthetic, you know, year round. And that would be a judgment call on the creator, thinking about who they're giving it to. And now I'm going to take my detail brush and I am going to outline this in that darker red just to help let it pop against that blue. Okay. So we got kind of the basis of our heart. And oop, I don't know what happened, but my camera went out of focus. Hold on, give me just a moment. There we go. I'm not sure what happened there, but it went out of focus for a moment. I apologize for that. And now we're going to use Naples Yellow to kind of do this aged music sheet kind of look. You know, after about trying to preserve your lines, it doesn't really super matter there. And I'm going to use a round 1 for this. Actually, I'm going to dry my canvas first because I don't trust myself not to stick my hands down in this red paint. There we go. And because yellow is kind of thin, it'll probably still see most of your watercolor line or whatever you used to help get your lines on your, if you used the traceable or if you drew it beforehand, you'll probably still see it under this yellow. And we'll add a little bit of white while this is still wet, so that way it looks more like properly aged rather than just a bunch of like yellowed out music paper, sheet music, excuse me. I was struggling for the word there. And while this section is still wet, I do think I'm going to stick a little bit of white in there just to help break up the color. We don't want this to look too uniform. We want this to look aged. And we'll add a little bit of that white down there too. All right, now we'll go and do the other side, and probably going to start up here at the top first though, just because that makes the most sense. I'm not usually a super big fan of Naples yellow, but in the case of like looking at like documents, or even sometimes with some skin colorations, Naples yellow is a good color to use for that. Now we'll add a little bit of that white into this side. I'm going to touch up a little bit from where I got a little overzealous with putting it in and kind of cleaning up my line a little bit on my violin with my backgrounds. And you know, it's a good idea at this point to do just a quick like checkup around your painting now that we've got all of the base layers in. Anywhere where you may have missed it and it's a little bit white or anything somewhere, now is a good time to kind of touch up that area. There we go. Okay. And I do think I'm going to put another quick little layer of my red down because red is very translucent and I kind of want this kind of a rich color. I have a couple of commission pieces that I'll be probably working on pretty soon. I'm going to be doing a really cool like electric guitar. And I think I might do that as a live stream just so if you are curious about the process for that. I will not be making it a traceable, being that it is something that somebody is paying for. But I do think I'll stream it just in case you're curious about, you know, the procedure and process of me doing a custom piece. And I'm going to do a little quick fill in on my background, on my little heart here too, just because I want the color to be nice and vibrant. And I don't really want to see all those brush strokes. Okay, so we kind of got our basing. Now we're going to start filling things in and having some fun. So I am going to start by adding in the lines for the sheet music. And I'm not necessarily going to use the reference image as like a total guide for this just because I don't think we really need to. But I will dry this first since this is going to be a little bit smeared if I don't. Okay. Now I'm a little more confident about sticking my hand down on it. So I'm going to take my watercolor pencil. And, well, actually, maybe I don't need to. I can still kind of see my lines. But if you weren't confident, you could use a watercolor pencil to kind of trace your lines back in. And because for me, it's easier to do a following line going down than it is to go sideways. Whenever I have to do a straight line, I always tilt my canvas to where my brush is going up and down instead of side to side. So I'm going to do all of my lines that need to go this direction first. And then I'm going to turn it and then do the lines that connect the two brackets. And I'm going to go ahead and outline my page. For this part, it's helpful to use like cheap acrylic black paint or watered down paint because it will be a little thinner and it will run a little smoother and it will help with thin lines. And right here, we're just kind of creating the idea that this sheet music is a couple of pages. And I'm going to turn it back this way so I can do this line. And I'm also going to put in the lines for my sheet music. And there's about, what, 1, 2, 3 lines that are in the middle. So I'm going to go ahead and stick one down the center. And then another down the center of the partition I just made. So that way they're kind of similar in size, but they don't have to be uniform. The texture of this paint kind of makes me think of when I put eyeliner on. This is the student level soft body black acrylic paint that I'm currently using to do this part. And it is working amazingly well for me. And there's a bit where you can see where like there's a line down the center for where it would have been folded. So we're just putting that in real quick. And while I'm right here, I'm going to go ahead and stick in my lines that go like this. And that one's going to come out of the sheet, so I'm not going to put anything there. Right, and now I'm going to turn my canvas back around. And this kind of disappears into there. And for this one, we're kind of saying that it's coming up out of the center there. And again, we're just going to put in our little sheet music lines. And the reason why this one is a little wider is because we're saying that it may be like bumped from being split open wide. And then we're seeing a wider view of this because of the way it's folded. And then it kind of disappears. It is kind of skewed as you're kind of reading it this way. And then we'll add the sideline there. And then we'll add the little folded line here too, from where we're kind of telling the story of this being folded. And then outline it. And I kind of made a whoopsie, I'm just realizing here with my background that I included this bit with that sheet, and I shouldn't have. So I'm just going to take my blue and fill that space in between where the sheet music would be and the bow. So I'm just taking a second to paint my background back in where I got a little overzealous in the beginning. There. And we'll have to add a little more in, but for now we'll stick with that. And we have the bow itself will be sort of a dark brown on the top piece. So we'll put a line of brown in. And it will kind of come up to a bit like that. And then we'll have another thin layer of this blue. I can't imagine actually trying to do this a different way, so I'm kind of glad I didn't try. It would have been a lot messier. I'm not going to take credit for it being a great idea, but it does actually work out better in my favor to try and do it this way rather than having tried to go around it. And now we have white for the string. I'm going to clean up my line a little bit there. Very good. Right now we'll continue drawing the other side of the bow on the other side. And can't get it the way I want to that way, so I'm going to turn it upside down. This makes it a little bit easier for me. And it kind of extends out to the sheet music. So I'm going to grab this real quick to help me kind of line up where this should go. Just so that way it makes sense. And you don't have to use a ruler, it just has to be something flat that would help you kind of continue your line and know where you need to match it up on the other side. And it's going to be a little bit thicker at that end. Now I'm going to put it back this way so that way it makes it easier for me to match up from the reference image. Okay, so it looks like it kind of widens here. With a bit like that. And then that white line where the string continues should be met at the end of that. Okay, so there's kind of our bow. We've got it in there now. And it looks like I should have continued the sheet music on this side over almost into the heart, so I am gonna correct that real quick. It should disappear into there. There. All right, and now we're gonna stick some music notes on there. And I'm not gonna try and match it perfectly, but we'll match it a little bit. But I'm gonna dry it first so I don't stick my wrist down in there. And first step is going to be over here, and it looks like a note kind of like this. And they got kind of a note that comes up off the line there. A little bit of a tail. And it looks like it goes there. And they've got that kind of a note. And then it's the same kind of one over here. Oh. And then over here we've got kind of one of these. And then this one, oop, my easel just kind of slid on me a little bit. Looks like it comes off of the page a little bit. And then there's another one that's kind of up here. And then over on this side, we've got one of those. And then another one that's kind of hanging off. And then with the tail over here. And then we've got one like this. And another note over here. I don't like that one of my notes got away with me a little bit, so I'm going to correct that a little bit. Yeah, I like that better. Okay. I actually think that it needs an extra note that they didn't put. I think it could use one that dips here. Right, and now we're going to start using our fan brush to add a little bit of texture. Not a lot, just a little. And I'm just going to barely put white on the tip here. And I'm just going to kind of dot on some texture in a couple of places. We're kind of implying that this is not like old, but we're implying that this is, you know, seen better days. It's got a little bit damaged. We're going to put this in a couple of places. We're going to put a little bit on the sheet music. It won't be as noticeable there because it's light, but we kind of want some of it there. We want to kind of let this be something that is kind of everywhere in this painting. We're going to do a little bit here at the edges of the heart too. And we're just barely using any paint here. And we'll go and add a little bit of darker and lighter areas to that as well. We're just kind of trying to tell a little bit of a story here. And I'm going to use some of this lighter red, and I'm going to tap some of this in here. And I'm also going to tap in some of that burnt umber into my fiddle. We're just creating a little bit of drama. We'll add a little bit up here in the top of this too. And you can feel free to add maybe a little bit of that brown in the sheet music towards like the center. And at the ends, just because that's kind of where you'd experience age or wear on sheet music. We're just kind of adding a little bit of an artifact feel to it. I'm going to go back and add some more of my red up here because I'm not quite happy with the texture on this. I think maybe I did too much white, so I'm just going to dab in some more of my red as a texture. Add a little bit go rogue here, so we're just going to fix that real quick. All right, so I'm feeling pretty good about it so far. I am going to add a little bit of something kind of with my fan brush down here too, just because I feel like it needs something on this table. It doesn't feel finished. So what I'm probably going to do is I'm going to mix in some white. And I'm just going to use this to kind of soften all of the flatness of that color a little bit. I'm going to turn it upside down so I can get better access. We are almost done. I do think I'm going to add a little bit of this up into here as well. Just to kind of continue that texture a little bit and to finish using up some of the paint that's on my palette. This is totally optional, being that this is not on the reference image. I just kind of feel like it needs it. I'm kind of happy with my background now. Maybe just a little bit of something more there. Okay, and now I'm going to add in the words. Actually, I think I'm going to do something over here too. I'm not fond of that there like that. I'm going to fix it. And sometimes you'll do that. You'll put something in, think it's a good idea, and it might not work out or it might not go like you pictured it in your head. And it's okay to take it out and change your mind. It's your painting. You are allowed to change your mind. Okay, so I'm going to use white to put it in. But I don't think I'm going to put Valentine. I think I am just going to put Don't Fiddle Around with My Heart on there. I think it should be clear at this point that it's a Valentine. And I think I'm going to dry it so that way I can kind of block out my letters first. All right. So now we're going to kind of block our letters in, and I'm going to put it's a good idea to do this with either chalk or a watercolor pencil, so that way you can kind of figure out what way is going to work best for filling it in. Don't. Actually, I think it'd be easier if I turn this a little bit for me. And I'm going to put Fiddle sort of in the center. All right, sorry. For me, I have to write with it down. Otherwise my angle gets all messed up. Don't fiddle around. I need to change my sizing. And this is why I recommend watercolor pencil heavily for this. So I've kind of got it blocked in there. Now I'm going to go ahead and put it in. And because we're doing this white over this red, you'll probably want to do a second layer of your white paint over your lettering. Ooh, the canvas moved. Okay, so I kind of got the basis in there. I just need to put another layer of white. And I am going to add a little more to his down here. Kind of make that a little more poppy. And again, using like craft paint, while it'll be thinner, it'll also be easier for lettering. Just because it'll be a little more fluid. And we are almost done, folks. We are about ready to sign. And my space in my A kind of got a little bit lost, so I can fix that real quick in a minute. And anywhere where you're not liking the way your letters ended, you can always touch up with your red to kind of touch up your lines. To give them a little bit of a smoother ending. Okay. And we are going to go ahead and sign this, and we are done. And I'm going to sign with black. All right. Thank you for meeting me at the easel. I hope to see you on Saturday when we paint the Queen of Hearts. Not the Disney version, this beautiful vintage Valentine version. Have a lovely evening. Bye-bye.